Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Are we live now? Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors, staff, and visitors. Thank you. If you could please take your seats. Welcome to the Emergency and Community Services Committee for June 15th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please switch all electronic devices to a non-audible function during this meeting. I note that quorum is now present. Before we get into the business of today's meeting, staff have asked me to say a few words on celebratory events happening this month. This month is National Indigenous History Month. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that June is National Indigenous History Month, a time where we recognize not only the historic contributions of Indigenous people to the development of Canada, but also the strength of present-day Indigenous communities. On June 21st, the city's Indigenous Relations team will be hosting a celebration at 12 p.m. in the forecourt of City Hall to honor National Indigenous Peoples Day and celebrate the rich heritage, diverse cultures, and outstanding achievements of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. For more information, please visit the city's website at www.hamilton.ca/ not sure if that's a backslash or / it's a / Indigenous. Pride Month. Pride Month is a time when we come together to honor 2S LGBTQIA+ community and recognize their contributions, struggles, and victories. It's time to foster understanding, create awareness, and promote equity for all individuals in our community. During this month, we reaffirm our commitment to cultivating an inclusive work environment where everybody feels valued, respected, and celebrated for who they are. When we create an environment where everyone feels safe to be their authentic selves, we foster innovation, collaboration, and a strong sense of belonging. It's important to remember celebrating Pride Month goes beyond a single month. It's a continuous effort to ensure that we are actively fostering an inclusive and supportive environment for all our colleagues and the community we serve. June is also Seniors Month, a time to recognize and celebrate the contributions seniors have made throughout their life and continue to make to enrich the Hamilton community. It is a time to recognize the social and health issues seniors face as they age, and a time to promote age-friendly communities, of which Hamilton is one of many worldwide. We will be learning more about the progress of Age-Friendly Hamilton at our committee meeting this afternoon. The annual Seniors Kickoff event will be hosted June 20th at Sackville Senior Centre. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have, under notices of motion, 12.1, affordable housing at 272 Caroline Street South. The Council will be asking for a motion to waive the rules for introduction of the matter at today's meeting, and also asks this committee if they wish to, if they could discuss the item before discussion items on the agenda today. And that is it.
So that will be after item number 9 and before item 10. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Nan. Any discussions? Seeing none, let's call the vote, please, Madam Clerk. Thank you. The vote carried 7-0. We're on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. To my colleagues and the public, I'm declaring a non-disqualifying interest with respect to item 12.2, the notice of motion, affordable housing at 272 Caroline Street South in Ward 2. As my spouse, my husband is the president and CEO of the Hamilton Community Foundation. The Hamilton Community Foundation is a participant in in this proposal, and that is before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any further declarations of interest? Seeing none, those who voted those who have noted a disqualifying interest, please ensure that when it's time to vote on the matter that you vote abstain, and your disqualifying interest will be noted correctly in the council minutes. Those who have noted a non-disqualifying interest will participate impartially in the decision-making process related to the matter. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the previous meeting of May 18th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Wang. Thank you. Any discussion on the approval of those minutes? Seeing none, let's call the vote, please. Thank you. And that vote carried 7-0. We're now moving on to staff presentations. 8.1 is Hamilton's plan for an age-friendly community, the 2022 Progress Report, HSC 23034. I'd like to welcome Lisa Maychek, Project Manager, Age-Friendly City, Healthy and Safe Communities, Penelope Petrie, Chair of the Seniors Advisory Committee, Angie Armstrong, Chair of the Age-Friendly Governance and Collaborative Committees, Mary Burnett, Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Society. Come on down. So perhaps we can introduce everybody before you begin your presentation so that we put names to faces.
Absolutely. So
to the microphone, please.
Thank you for having us. So this is Mary Burnett. She's the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Society. Angie Armstrong is a Hamilton Council on Aging board member, as well as our chair of the Age-Friendly Collaborative Committee. And to my left here is Penelope Petrie. She is the chair of the Seniors Advisory Committee. I'm Lisa Maychek, project manager with Hamilton's Age Friendly Plan. Before we get started, I just wanted to just point out a few things. I mean, there's a lot of us here, and the reason being, the Age Friendly Plan is a collaborative, and it's a community plan. So it's not just a City of Hamilton plan. It takes a community to make it age friendly. We have been on this journey for about 10 years now. It first started with the Council on Aging approaching the City of Hamilton to start to plan for the aging demographic, because we know it's a growing one. And here we are 10 years later, working on the implementation of our second plan. A key feature to our second plan is the dementia-friendly piece, which Mary is going to speak to about today, which is very unique, very rare. I think there might be one other in the country, which is in Vancouver. But let's just get started, and if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free.
You're going to do the slides? Okay, so basically we have this demographic profile. Seniors are fastest growing age group worldwide, which is interesting, I think. And we all know that, because it was announced with a lot of flair, that we now have in Canada more seniors, more people age 65 plus than children under the age of 14. So our demographics are definitely changing. The senior population in Ontario is expected to double by 2041, and right now there are 183,000 plus adults over age 55 living in Hamilton. So that's 32% of our population. In 2016, adults over the age of 55 made up 30% of the population. So this group is definitely growing. Next. So the World Health Organization is the moving body behind age-friendly cities. They've established the framework. Being an age-friendly city is an ongoing process. You have a plan, and when the plan comes to an end, you have to build a new plan, and it just keeps revolving as new things come up. So in 2010, the Global Network was established. Currently, a membership of 1,445 cities in 51 countries. In 2022, there were 1,300 cities in 47 countries. So the whole age-friendly is building, this whole concept is building, and very fast growth. Hamilton's become a certified member, has been a certified member since 2015. The 2021 to 2026 Age-Friendly Hamilton Plan is our second plan. It's aligned with the City of Hamilton's vision, which is to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully. It's building on the successes of the first plan, which was written in 2014, with an added principle, building a dementia-friendly community. So age-friendly plans are based on 7 strategic goals. Ours has 21 objectives and 61 actions. The goal areas, the goal areas are housing, transportation, information and communication, which is really a vital one, health and community services, social participation, which includes recreation, learning, the arts, and culture, civic engagement, which includes volunteerism and employment, and outdoor spaces.
Good afternoon. You'll have to excuse my voice. I've kind of got a little husky today.
You sound great.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the progress report for 2022. And we re-engaged the community and the city staff with the 2022 Age-Friendly Survey to better understand age-friendly practices taking place in the community and within various city departments. And we do have a representation from the city as well as our community partners. We received over 50 submissions this year, which more than doubled from 2021 to align with the Hamilton's age-friendly plan. So we've really grown that sort of exponentially. And submissions received from all sectors, including 2 from the private sector, which is an area that we really want to expand on. So we are committed to growing our engagement with the private sector. Now, here are some statistics. You'll see from the responses of that report, 60% came from the nonprofit voluntary sector. And as you know, volunteers, we can't operate without volunteers. 18% came from the public sector, which is the City of Hamilton. 18% also came from the public sector, which is the other part, which is health and education, et cetera. And then we had 4%. And if you look at those numbers, that's where the 50, how we broke it down. So you can see that our nonprofit and voluntary sector really is the main, I'd call it the beast of how we do our work. Now, this is another graph that you'll see, and you'll notice that the largest amount of interaction is with social participation, 40%, which involves recreation, learning, the arts, and culture. Then I'm going to sort of go the other way for a minute here and look at health and community services, which was 26%. Then you look at information and communication, which was 10% of those reports, 10% transportation, and 10% housing. Civic engagement, volunteerism, and employment was 2%, and 2% again was outdoor spaces and buildings. So as you see that housing is an area that the 3, information, transportation, and housing, is the area that we really want to build more on. And you know, affordable housing is it's something that I'm very involved with. So data at a glance, the total number of age-friendly practices were 50. Total number of different organizations who participated were 39. Sorry about that. The total number of age-friendly practices in progress was 37, and the total number of evaluations completed to date was 13. And the total number of age-friendly practices that involved older people in at least one stage of planning and implementation was 43.
Angie, if you'd like, there's water there. It
Where?
might help you. Just to the, there you go.
Thank you.
As someone who talks a lot, I know it dries out the throat.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
And yes, I get it. Some wish I didn't talk as much. I could feel it. Go ahead, Angie.
Yeah, and to continue here, that the total number of people who positively were impacted by this was 48,874. And last but not least, this is the part that I just want to sort of make your awareness of, that Hamilton's age-friendly plan is definitely growing. And we did try to do that by having a presentation earlier this year to really expand on that and to have input. So 40% of the survey respondents reported increased awareness of Hamilton's age-friendly plan. And I'd really like to thank the city for, working with us and getting that happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Okay, so in April this year, we decided to invite all of the respondents, so a lot of our age-friendly partners, including city staff that contributed to the survey, invite them to a networking event. So there were 50+ individuals there representing various organizations throughout the community, as well as city staff. And what it really was to learn more about some of the age-friendly practices that were taking place across the community, but then also to do a little work to basically identify some of the current barriers, some opportunities and solutions. One of the things we promised with the launch of our second age-friendly plan back in 2021 was to do a midway review. So this was an opportunity to take a look at the recommendations, to look at current issues that were taking place, and to identify those as a collaborative to work on moving forward. So that was a very successful event, and it was also an opportunity for collaboration for various partners that submitted feedback through the survey. It was an opportunity for them to network and potentially create some partnerships. So moving forward this year with key priorities, so as I mentioned, the event in April will help us to reshape what we're doing and to inform some of our future goals. We do have a goal of developing an age-friendly equity and diversity and inclusion framework. We want to increase membership on our collaborative. So right now, the 3 partners sit on our collaborative as well as the Alzheimer's Society. We have members of staff from various departments that sit on the collaborative, and several community partners that represent each of the goals. We want to continue to increase awareness. So that's through various types of communication vehicles and community forums, like our age-friendly event and our upcoming seniors kickoff event. I'm going to report that we have almost 500 older adults that are attending the event next week, which we're a little nervous about. There's so many, but that's okay. And then we have about 60 exhibitors from the profit, not-for-profit, and public sectors. And then we have various presentations taking place as well. So one of those presentations is going to be our progress report, so that we can inform more on age-friendly successes. Continually, it's ongoing collaboration with city departments to track some of the initiatives related to the age-friendly plan, as well as with the community, because there's a lot of great work being done in the community, and it's important to continue to recognize that this is a community plan, that it takes everyone to make Hamilton an age-friendly community. Implement our age-friendly collaborative action plans, and at the end of this year, we'll launch another survey to our community partners as well as city staff to learn about new initiatives, progress with existing initiatives, so that we can then report back to the community as well as City Council next year.
Okay. Now, the big issue of the day today is dementia. Am I all right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm here not only as the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society, but I'm also the board treasurer on the Hamilton Council on Aging. And that's how I got involved in this very exciting partnership with the City of Hamilton in integrating dementia-friendly initiatives into your age-friendly plan. Dementia is a huge issue in Canada today. Just as our population is aging, the biggest risk factor for developing dementia is age. So are the numbers of persons affected by dementia. In this city alone, we project about 25,000 people who are living with dementia, and for every person affected by dementia, we say there are 10 more impacted. So you see some startling numbers up here. The other big thing that you probably should all be aware of is that many of the people who are in hospital waiting to come out, the people they call alternate level of care or block beds or other negative terms, which I don't quite frankly like, are often people with cognitive impairment and some form of dementia. This is just a graph that shows you the startling growth. So currently we have about 600,000 Canadians living with dementia. By 2050, that number will rise to close to 2 million. So this is an exciting project that the Hamilton Council on Aging received funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada to conduct a 4-year study on empowering dementia-friendly communities in Hamilton and Haldimand County. The purpose of this project was really to look at how do we create and promote promising practice programs and initiatives that will improve the quality of life for those affected by dementia. And that includes both the person living with the disease and their care partners. And it was interesting, they asked us to compare the city of Hamilton, which has an age-friendly plan, with Haldimand County, which doesn't have an age-friendly plan and is more rural. So what is a dementia-friendly community? Well, there are a million different definitions. I have a good friend who says it's all about love, listening, understanding, validating, and empathizing. But what is important about whatever definition you come up with is that it emphasizes the social aspects of the disease and not the medical ones. This disease is one of the most difficult aspects of dementia is the rupture of social relationships and the stigma that people encounter as they go out and about in the community. People are more afraid of developing dementia than death in many cases. So what were our project objectives? We had 2 main objectives. The first one was to create dementia-friendly action plans. So in Hamilton, it was wonderful because of your age-friendly plan. We were able to integrate several strategies into that plan. In Haldimand, we haven't quite got them ready to do an age-friendly plan, but we're working on it. And so in Haldimand, we did some other projects in the community to raise awareness. And 2 empowerment teams were created out of this project. And the empowerment teams are made up of people living with dementia. Not their care partners, not their friends. It's the people who actually have the disease leading the projects and telling us about how we can make our communities more dementia-friendly. So the second objective was to enhance awareness about dementia and the need for dementia-friendly strategies in both of our communities, in both Hamilton and Haldimand, Norfolk. And there was a whole education program that was designed. I'm pleased to say that the Alzheimer's Society is continuing this work. And the second major piece was an awareness campaign to help reduce stigma. And I've given to your clerk today a copy of the brochure. This is a fabulous education piece. There's a wonderful video that really highlights the stories of people living with dementia and helps to destroy many of the myths that I think many people in our community have about who is a person living with dementia.
And that's it. There's our contact information if you wanted to note it.
That's great. Mary, if we can just go back one slide, can you read out the dementia webpage, the campaign webpage, so that people...
Absolutely. If you go to www.facesofdementia.ca, and Faces of Dementia is one word. And there you will see the stories of the people I have shared in this brochure. And they're people from all different walks of life telling what it is like to live with dementia and that there's a lot of good living long after a diagnosis.
Well done, Mary. Thank you very much. And well done, all of you. We do have questions, so don't run away. Councillor Tom Jackson.
Thank you so much, Chair Clark. And if you just allow a little latitude as I ask a couple of questions, I just want to say how blessed we are in our community. These 4 people standing before us are just one example of the multitude of people that are leading in our community to help both seniors age in place and seniors age successfully across our community. And now the dementia-friendly component that I think we brought in during the pandemic is also an important integral part and parcel of this overall plan for our city. So I just want to give a shout out right away to our wonderful project manager, Lisa Maychek, who coordinates all of these programs and facilitates so many of these events. And along with nice meeting Chair Armstrong and you, CEO Burnett. And of course, I know Chair Penelope Petrie, as Councillor Nan and I last term had the privilege of serving on the Seniors Advisory Committee. Chair Clark, what a wonderful collaborative. If I could just quickly say, historically, as I often do before I get to a couple of questions, about 10 years ago, some of you around this table may remember and know a Dr. Margaret Denton. She was instrumentally involved with the Hamilton Council on Aging. We met at a coffee shop on Locke Street 10 years ago. Long story short, I was on SAC, she was with the Hamilton Council of Aging. We said, how can we combine and collaborate our resources to make Hamilton age-friendly? And instead of doing in silos, let's work collaboratively, cooperatively together. And here we are 10 years later. And it's just wonderful to see the results of this. So, a question to you on the dementia side, if I could, CEO Burnett. You know, it used to be, and I'll state for myself as somebody who had a couple of family members that went through cancer, I used to think that cancer was one of the most tragic, debilitating diseases to watch take over someone's body and spirit. In the last few years, I've almost put dementia right up there in the same category in a different manner in watching someone that is suffering with Alzheimer's and or dementia and cognitively impaired issues. And so I'm seeing 40% awareness of our plan. And through you, Chair Clark, to maybe starting with CEO Burnett, what more is it the city can do in terms of enhancing the awareness of the dementia-friendly plan? And exactly what is your hope and projection over the next year or two, please, Mary?
Thank you, Councillor. Mary, please.
Oh, sorry. I'm out of order here. Some of the work that you've already done is fabulous. You're starting to train municipal staff in recognizing signs of dementia, because that's the first thing that we all need to raise our awareness and understand, no, that person is not drunk. I mean, a lot of people with dementia are mistaken for someone who's either taking illicit drugs or had imbibed too much alcohol, when in fact they're just living with their disease. We train the bus drivers, the managers have been trained. We need to train all the bus drivers. We work with libraries, we're training library staff, but also your workers to recognize, you know, I'm thinking about Ontario Works, even Ontario Works, as much training and education that the city can do of its own staff will really help our community be more aware of dementia and respond more appropriately.
Excellent, Mary. Good to hear. Thank you for that. Also, can I ask through maybe to Project Manager Maychuk, we provide funding to both the Seniors Advisory Committee and the Hamilton Council on Aging. How are your resources, Lisa, in terms of with the growing demographic of, you're saying 32% of our population 55 plus, and it's only going to get bigger across our city. Just wondering in terms of resources, both funding-wise and human resource-wise, maybe give us a picture of what is and maybe what could be needed in the future. Through you, Chair Clark.
Thank you, Councillor. Project Manager Maychuk, please.
Through the chair. It's a growing age demographic, and there are more and more needs all the time. I don't know why this was a day, but I do usually get a lot of calls. I had numerous calls today, and it was all about navigating the system. That's one of the reasons we are doing the seniors kickoff event, is it aligns with the age-friendly plan that older adults don't know where to get information, they don't know who to go to. So that's one reason we're doing the kickoff, is to bring a whole bunch of people together and bring the information to them. We're very fortunate to have the Seniors Advisory Committee and the Hamilton Council on Aging Board, because we're all working together as we point out today, to make Hamilton age-friendly, but there's just not enough resources. I'm pretty well when it comes to the city, and thank goodness for, you know, a lot of our other city departments who support the age-friendly initiative, but when it comes to a staff complement, it is me, but definitely need more. You know, just when I look at some of the events, in addition to other tasks I have, I'm sometimes overwhelmed, but it's very important. Older adults like to go out. They like to talk to people and get the information that way. A lot don't have access to technology or can't afford digital technology devices. There's a lot of barriers out there. So as we grow or move forward and this age demographic is growing, yeah, there's going to be definitely more both human resources and financial resources needed. We were lucky last year that we were able to get some more funding for, or an increased funding for the Hamilton Council on Aging. So that was a huge success. And another big thing that we did was the Seniors Advisory Committee get a lot of work done. They have 4 working groups. Communications, housing, transportation or getting around, and elder abuse. What we really focused in on this term of council was aligning those working groups and the work that they're doing with the recommendations in the age-friendly plan. It only makes sense that we're working together to move those recommendations forward. So we are lucky to have them as well. But again, yeah, we're all working very hard, but more resources are always needed.
Thank you. I appreciate the genuineness and sincerity of your answer, Project Manager Maychuk. And you know I'm a big admirer and supporter and somebody who's applauded your work and the enormity of the work you've literally taken on as the sole bureaucrat overseeing this. And that's where we come in down the road. And I just want to leave a thought, Chair Clark. 2 terms ago, former councillor Matt Green and I, it was because of the Seniors Advisory Committee, part of the vision statement of the city and to age successfully. That wasn't in the original vision statement. The Seniors Advisory Committee unanimously recommended that. Councillor Green and I moved it as an amendment, and here we are about 7-8 years later, the vision statement, best place to raise a child and age successfully. I'll continue to be a big supporter of the work they're carrying on. Thanks, Chair Clark.
Thank you very much, Councillor. The next speaker is Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. But more importantly, thank you so much for the work that you do day in, day out. I have to say, just personally on the awareness campaign, seeing a South Asian woman represented wearing her traditional clothes, sharing her lived experience in the campaign had not only a direct impact in my family's life, but tremendous impact in the South Asian community, not only in Hamilton, but regionally and going far wide. There's been a big intake and uptick on the videos that are specific to the South Asian woman that's featured in the campaign. I've personally shared it among many communities in order to support our aging demographic, particularly in the Punjabi Sikh community, but I know that it's been shared a lot among cultural organizations as a result. So thank you so much for that very important work and being able to do it in a way that's so inclusive. Thank you. Also, thank you to the Alzheimer's Society for all the ways you support individuals as well as their caregivers here in Hamilton and regionally. So because my personal life has been now day in and day out living with and supporting people with dementia and interacting with folks living with dementia daily as I visit my mom, I've been deep diving into the topic, and it's becoming an area for my own personal advocacy, but also how can I play a bigger part and role? And one of the biggest learnings I've had over the last 2 years is the increased rate at which, Chair, onset dementia is affecting younger and younger populations. So we're seeing diagnosis coming in at teenagehood, coming in 20s, coming in 30s, coming in at 40s, 50s, on it goes. And so I'm wondering, with the good work that you all have been doing that has focused on it from a senior age perspective, acknowledging that onset dementia is now impacting particularly a demographic between 30 and 40 pretty significantly, is there an opportunity to make the work more multi-generational?
Mary?
Thank you very much for your comments. And absolutely, we recognize 15% of people living with dementia are younger than 65. So it is not just an older adult disease. if the city, I mean, I don't know how we do it with the city, but certainly the Alzheimer's Society, we have young onset groups. It's hard though, because there's still so much stigma and it's not always recognized in younger adults. Many of the people, the people you mentioned who are in the video are actually client advisors on our board. And we have another woman who was diagnosed when she was 48. And it took her almost 7 years to receive a diagnosis because people just couldn't believe it. And she knew that something wasn't
wrong.
right.
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge issue. I think as an Alzheimer's Society, we have an obligation to really talk about that more in the public and also offer more programs for younger people.
Excellent, thank you. So one of the areas of prevention focus a lot around physical activity and nutrition, eating healthy, let alone the things that we shouldn't be ingesting in our body that generally have bad impacts, i.e. Smoking or consuming other toxins. The other piece being staying mentally and socially active and being aware of your own state of health and finding support to control what you can in order to live more healthfully. All those sound like general good health practices, and yet as a result of the pandemic, we know specifically staying active and socially active and therefore mentally stimulated, those things have had a tremendous, those areas of life have been tremendously negatively impacted. So is there anything that is emerging in the plan through you, Chair, that focuses on how do we impact what's needed? Like, so there's the plan, but what are we doing to create and measure impact?
Lisa, please.
Well, in terms of measurement, we're not there yet. But I think the big goal is that we've embedded the dementia-friendly recommendations, and like age-friendly, what's age-friendly to an 80-year-old is age-friendly to an 8-year-old, right?
100%.
So the same with the dementia-friendly recommendations that we have included in the plan. And as Mary mentioned, there are workshops that were facilitated to various organizations throughout the community, as well as city staff and HSR and recreation, a lot of front-facing staff to be more, and education, this is what I'm getting at, right? Yeah. It's about education. So basically to be more informed about what is dementia and how to identify someone that might have dementia so you can best serve them. So I think what we need to be doing is taking a look at those recommendations and being creative and how we can, you know, when you talked about younger generations, how we maybe can implement a project or workshops perhaps that will help support that age group. But again, back to Councillor Jackson's point, you know, everything takes human resources, financial resources. A lot of the work that's done is based on funding, whether it's through the Dementia Friendly Project or the Hamilton Council on Aging have done fabulous work and have offered workshops in a variety of areas, but you know, there's still work to be done, of course.
Most certainly.
So,
yeah, and I appreciate through you, Chair, the lack of it's a time where we need to be investing resources in order to make sure that this is getting connected in the ways that it needs to reach as many residents as possible. The next question I have is more structural and systemic in nature, and that's, we had a delegation from the Greater Hamilton Health Network on Monday at Public Health Committee. And one of the areas of discussion there was the lack of mapping that exists in the city of all of the primary care providers, and then subsequently all of the social supports that are available within a geographic area, and then on the kind of, you know, target radius moves out. But the whole point is to be able to ensure our residents have a network of referral and connection within a geographic area so that they can access the supports that they need to. I wonder if there is an opportunity here for your good work to be connected to the Greater Hamilton Health Network and see if that might be an avenue of resource and connectivity.
So I'm very connected with the Greater Hamilton Health Network, and I think that's a great suggestion. I love what you were saying earlier. Do you want to come and work for us? I mean, this is...
When I take on an issue, let me tell you.
You get it. I mean, one of the things I didn't say is there is no cure right now for this disease, but we can modify the trajectory or delay its onset through good, healthy living. So public health could be involved too, because what's good for our heart is good for our brain. But I will certainly take that back, and I know Melissa McCallum very well and was on one of the original groups that started the Greater Hamilton Health Network. And I think you're absolutely right. We mapped our own. At my organization, we did a mapping exercise to see who we're serving and who we're not serving. And it was very interesting. There's some areas of this city that I think people just aren't getting out. So we've got to go to them.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is true in health for all of healthcare.
Thank you. Final question, if I could, Chair, is whether or not in the tracking or assessment of need in community, has there been a contemplation of looking at the number, or how many, particularly looking at our unhoused population, and how many of the residents that are unhoused may or may not be living with dementia? As it occurs to me that your earlier
I have
comment...
another hat.
your
I'm going to put on another hat.
Okay.
I'm the chair of St. Matthew's House Board of Directors, and that is certainly, the St. Matthew's House, I think, contracts with you for some of the outreach workers, and that has become an issue. We just entered into a contract with Good Shepherd and St. Matthew's House and the Alzheimer's Society to look at seniors who are living at risk, and one of the areas that they're identifying is people who are younger, who for various reasons, because diabetes, head injuries, significant substance abuse can also add to your prevalence or likelihood of developing a dementia. So that started to come up. So one of the things we're looking at is how do we cross-train our staff and the outreach workers that the city funds so that we recognize it and get them connected to supports.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. So many questions. And so I think if it's okay, I'll take a lot of them offline and we can focus on some follow-ups. Really interested, just coming from Ward 13, lots of seniors who have had conversations about rural transit, seeing that clearly identified in the plan, really excited about that. Also, we know that the community of Dundas has, I think, about a third of the city of Hamilton seniors are getting close to that number. So lots to do, but I will say on these notes of a dementia-friendly city, or I guess moving forward on some of these things, really understand the education awareness pieces. I think we've talked a lot about those. Hoping to focus a little bit more on like the capital or some of those other pieces and just these questions, not that that other piece isn't important. Dundas Community Services already told me they want to become a dementia-friendly community here in Dundas. They want to help lead the way. What do we do? What are the next steps?
Sorry, I don't mean to be taking over the show here. We actually are already working. The Alzheimer's Society is working with Dundas Community Services. They had a wonderful day last week, and I was there. We were talking about dementia, and we're going to support them because they're involved with the business, the BIA, and it takes a whole community to support people affected by dementia. Dundas is a perfect neighborhood or community in some respects because it's got such a high population of older adults.
Thank you through the chair. And what are some of those, like, what does that collaboration look like? Or because I saw when reading through the senior, the age-friendly plan, thinking about some of those dementia-facing recommendations, seeing a lot about customer service, like, oh, it's similar to AODA, like, how do you engage with people? How do you ensure information's accessible? I know that's all good stuff, but I also know it's not the end of the work we need to do. When we're thinking about those partnerships or thinking about that work, what are some of the projects we might take on?
So you could get the businesses in downtown Dundas to agree to be trained in recognizing dementia, and then they could put up a little sign. We have little umbrellas or whatever they can put in their windows. We understand dementia. So people living with dementia know they feel safe going into that business, and if they stumble with their money or they can't remember their PIN, there's a appropriate and empathetic face at the other end. So that's a first step. That's an example of one thing that could be done.
Councillor?
Can I Can I just tack on to that? Yeah.
Sure.
So I think one of the big things is the private sector. I mean, we can train city staff, we can train a lot of not-for-profit organizations that have participated in the training, but it's really getting the private sector on board too and getting them trained. And so I know that I've had conversations with Dundas Community Services as well, and they're right on board. I know that the ED there is connected to the BIA, and wouldn't that be a great pilot project, the community of Dundas? So, we recognize it. And one thing I wanted to add too is, and it's in the report, an initiative that we're bringing back is called the Seniors at Risk. And amongst those seniors at risk are those living with dementia. And the reason we're bringing it back is because of the closure of Catholic Family Services. And the services that were provided by them is now under the responsibility of St. Matthew's, Good Shepherd, and the Alzheimer's Society. So we are just in the process of starting it, and one of those people that are going to sit at the table is Dundas Community Services. So it is a collaborative, and I think, as we spoke before, it's only in a collaborative that we can get this work done.
Thank you. And through the chair, just two more questions from me, really appreciating this. Earlier today, we were in Audit, Finance, and Administration, and we were looking at discretionary funds that we have within our wards. One of those funds is minor capital repairs, making sure our sidewalks are level, they're not a tripping hazard, things like that. Seeing in the Hamilton Age-Friendly report and those recommendations under the public and open spaces, goal 7, there's a comment about sufficient benches and seating and covered areas. What's sufficient? Because what's sufficient for me may be different from someone else. So I'm just wondering if we're, say, putting in some benches or looking to make sure we're mapping out our community, is it every 100 meters? Like, what are some of the ways that we can ensure we get to that sufficiency mark?
I mean, the feedback we did receive from older adults, that is what informed the plan. So sufficient would, I guess, address accessibility issues. Of course, our folks in Public Works, we would consult with them as to, what's sufficient. But an actual definition, I mean, it's very broad. Again, I really don't even know how to answer that question fully. I think it would be some consultation with perhaps ACPD, as well as staff in Public Works, who do work around trails and seating and such.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Definitely something to follow up on. And then again, just thinking about what are the ways that we can ensure that our communities truly are age friendly. Are there lasting or other recommendations? I just know funding's been mentioned so many times, but I think we also know that an age-friendly city is an accessible community, is all these other co-benefits. And so if there was to be investment in building out neighborhoods and building out communities, thinking about that public realm area, not so much the private service provision, but the public realm, just wondering what some of those recommendations would be. Understanding there is a need for the private service sector, but just trying to find out what some of those other recommendations would be too.
There's so many.
What about housing?
Yeah.
Affordable housing?
And through the chair, I'd say that one of the things that you really have to look at is housing as well. And, developers are out there and they have to understand that people are aging, and rather than building something today, they have to think long-term. So the way that they design those buildings is very important. You have to think of someone aging in place. And that's an area that I am quite involved with. And I'm hoping that as our city, all this new development that is happening here, that they're taking that into consideration. As a person aged, toilets have to be higher. Doorways have to be wider. You don't put carpeting in the place, because if you could have a wheelchair or you're going to have a walker, it's not going to be accessible for them. Is there a lift, in the houses? I would just give you an example, because I was raised in the UK, and I'm actually going to be going there at the end of the month. One of the things that my sister sent me the other day was an accessible house that they're building where she lives. And it has everything in place for her. Should she need to go in there, they can put an elevator into a 2-story house. the doors are wider. The bathroom has a roll-in bathroom. Those are the kinds of things that you have to look at for apartments. Not necessarily every unit, but maybe on each floor. You have to think of people having to transition into those things. So those are things that I think are very important, and I think that the city, as part of its engineering development team, they have to look at those things. Are you building things for people to stay in place? So I think that's important. And of course, as Lisa mentioned, Public Works have to look at sidewalks. People need walkers. They can't, and in the winter, they can't access these, the facilities. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, you want to wrap up? You good? Okay. Holly, you wanted to provide us some comments, please?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Nan, in regards to your comment around primary care, we have actually started that journey, Mary, at the Community Support Services Group. We had Dr. Brian McKenna, who's the deputy lead for primary care, come to meet with many community agencies to better understand what we can offer to support our seniors to age in place. So those conversations are happening. He's bringing it back to the primary care team meetings to help inform, but there's still lots of work to be done, but that journey has started.
Thank you. Councillor Wang?
Thank you. Thank you all for your delegation through you, Chair. I know I've already brought this up with both Director Odwari and Senior Project Manager Lisa Maychek, but in our meeting, I actually did talk about our seniors that are aging in place in Hamilton, but they are Chinese, and their preferred language to learn and to interact with is not English. And I wanted to just ask, how much of a consideration for other languages, just because we are also a net benefactor of a lot of immigration, and the challenges there is that we sometimes do not offer programming in languages that people feel most comfortable in. So I wonder, how does this play into how we're looking at age-friendly cities, but also dementia friendly. So how does this work through you, Chair?
Who wants to handle that one?
Through the chair, since I have come on to the Hamilton Council and I chair the Age-Friendly Collaborative and the Governance Committee, one of the things that I've asked of the committee is that we do look at EDI, because we are a very diverse community and we don't reflect what is out there. And I think that it's important that moving forward, what we do, we have to have documents translated. We've got to find out what those communities are their needs might be slightly different. As people age in place based on cultural differences and that sort of thing, we need to adapt. I want to say, though, we can't please every single person, but we've got to have the flexibility to show that at least we're working towards those goals. So that is a project that we're hoping to start over the summer. And as that develops, I'm sure you'll be made aware of that as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor?
Wonderful. And honestly, thank you for that answer. I've already had some really great conversations with both Holly and Lisa about this, so I don't want to rehash what we talked about, but I did want to bring that up in open forum, so that way it got identified at this committee. Second is, how can we support seniors, dementia, people living with dementia, especially when it comes to community safety and well-being? Specifically, I'm thinking about one of my Ward 5, well, actually they were a Ward 5 resident that happened to wander into Ward 4 and unfortunately passed. It was Miss Shirley Love that had wandered away during the winter months and was unfortunately found deceased in Kings Forest. So how do we encourage more of that safety and well-being, because there are a lot of wonderful suggestions here, but perhaps from a more practical security sense, what are some of the different ways that we can encourage more learnings or more actions as it relates to providing more security for people living with dementia?
Mary?
Through the chair. I did it right this time. It's a great question, and there are now some very good tracking devices. I mean, it used to be historically people had tracking devices, civil liberties. But I have to tell you, if I develop dementia, I'm fine if you put one on me because I don't want to freeze to death, you know? And so there are lots of options and information about tracking devices through the Alzheimer's Society. People can contact them. But there are other things. There also is public education. So we see an older adult who seems to be lost or not appropriately dressed. I had a friend who lives in Freelton who was driving down her road one day in the winter and she saw a woman in her slippers in her housecoat. So what did she do? She stopped and picked her up. We have to become a more caring, compassionate community because these things are going to happen. And if people are trained to recognize and stop and realize that these people need assistance, I think that will help as well.
Okay, thank you. Last question through you, Chair. Mary, you did bring up devices and new tracking technology, and how closely does our council or any of the seniors advisory committees work with, say, organizations like Innovation Factory to facilitate new technology or innovative solutions to solving some of these big challenges? Is that something that's on your radar?
We've been working with a group that I think this city has supported, the Ressam Gardens on West 5th, and they're doing some really cool work. And I think they're working with the Innovation Group here, and they're looking at, you know, how they can make the park across the street accessible so it's not just older adults, but people with young children. So if you go to the park and all of a sudden you can't find your kid, you can look on your phone and locate the individual. So I think there's some very innovative ideas out there, and we just have to put pedal to the metal and get more real concrete action.
Chair, I'm also happy to do those introductions to Innovation Factory and some of the different organizations that are involved with solving some of these big societal challenges. In particular, I'm thinking about super young but highly educated and talented people that are looking at assistive devices to help with handshakes, and how are they translating information like that, allowing much more of those dignity to be brought back. And I know that many students at McMaster University are really primed at trying to figure out how do they solve some of these, everything from wandering, from Alzheimer dementia wandering to just pattern recognition and ensuring that we're keeping with cognitive abilities. So I am happy to do all of those introductions to anyone that would like to be connected. Okay, wonderful, thank you.
I'm seeing lots of nodding heads. Okay, Councillor Kretsch, you're up next, please.
Thanks very much. And something I heard from a lot of seniors and continue to hear from a lot of seniors, especially in our denser urban areas, is talk about isolation. Specifically when you spoke earlier to talking about sidewalk clearing, not something we hear about, but something we're not really talking about quite yet, I think, and maybe for future Seniors Month kickoffs or other kinds of events, is what happens as we densify in terms of isolation. So wayfinding, getting around areas is something that people take for granted. I'll never forget knocking on someone's door many years ago now, I guess, maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, and person in tears because a building in the neighborhood had been torn down without any notice, and they just were used to that building being there, and they were just like kind of shocked that it wasn't there anymore. It was a 2-story building, nothing I think anyone would take considerable note of, but it vanished. And so they were like, oh, you know, just upset that no one had told them it was going to happen. And that scale in that one instance, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was probably manageable for most people. But the scale of development that's coming is not going to be very manageable for everyone psychically. And so, you know, what does it mean when you try and go out and things are missing, you don't know where you're going? The LRT is going to, of course, create situations where it's hard to move around in the ways you're used to moving around and getting around. So is there going to be a focus as we go through a massive, frankly, I will say, transformation in the lower city around ensuring that we focus our energies. I'm committed to it for sure, to make sure people can get around and find ways around and make sure LRT is done well and all the development's being done well. But is there a way that we can incorporate this messaging and this conversation with folks who are in the lower city and are going to be exposed to these things, I think, more acutely than maybe others might be?
Lisa?
I think that it's a great, bringing up the LRT, I just think of information education to seniors. So we could, when the LRT project's up and rolling and they're educating the public, we as a collaborative could specifically target older adults, whether it's at the seniors kickoff event. We partner with some community organizations, have smaller groups. There's many ways of which we can reach a lot of older adults in the lower city. So no, but I think the LRT is a great example of something that we could target and educate older adults about it.
If it's helpful, we're working slowly but surely to get some more community resources to work with Metrolinx and others around that specific area in the core, and we'll be trying to organize meetings in the coming years, I will say, around this kind of thing. So maybe we can have some specifically targeted to seniors, and happy to work with you on that. My other question for you was about a comment you made a little bit earlier in your presentation. I just wonder if you could unpack it a bit, because I don't have enough knowledge to understand it. You said that during the Seniors Month kickoff, or if I understood, you said there'll be presentations from profit, for-profit, sorry, those are the same people, profit, not-for-profit, and then I think you said like some other group, I don't know who it was. What kind of presentations would be coming from profit-oriented companies to seniors in this context? I don't understand what that looks like, and I'm just curious what that means.
So our exhibitors, they'll basically have tables. We have them from all sectors. But I think we have about 5 or 6 presentations, and there's a mix. So we have Hamilton Police Services coming to talk about the most recent frauds and scams, because there are new ones every single day. So we try to educate older adults as much as we can around that. Our profit or private, as you mentioned, one of the ones we have is from our sponsor, Chartwell. So Chartwell has for close to 10 years now sponsored the Seniors Awards, and more recently the Seniors Kickoff event. And they are going to be talking about their Chartwell Foundation, which in a nutshell, it's like you have a wish and they'll grant it. And it's not just for their residents, because we know that Chartwell residences are very expensive. It's for any community member. So you can just nominate someone, this is their wish, and submit it to Chartwell, and they'll grant that wish. I know the one local was a couple that were huge Tiger Cat fans, and both of their mobility was very limited, and Chartwell made it happen. They got to the Grey Cup. So, it was like, a wishing type program. So another one that I can think of, and I think we only have 2 profit, is, and another sponsor is Royal LePage. The ladies of Royal LePage are going to talk all about, and they are senior specialists. There's a certain certification for that, all around downsizing. So, someone's lived in their home for 40, 50 years, and now what are the next steps? And a lot of people have no idea what those next steps are in terms of where to go, how to get rid of everything that's in their house. So they're going to talk about all the steps involved in downsizing.
Councillor?
Thanks for clarifying. That's really helpful. I ask because I'm just trying to understand that relationship. I haven't been to, I don't think, enough city events to really be able to say, I really fully understand the full matrix of how we bring presenters and sponsors forward in those conversations, but also cautious when we're thinking about vulnerable communities, about for-profit organizations making presentations to communities that are very vulnerable, right? Because that's the city in a certain kind of way saying, oh, we think this is great, right? Please come forward so-and-so, come forward so-and-so, right? And authorizing or giving credit or credence to those organizations may seem like an authority we're conveying, and other people say, oh, great, this is a trusted person. And then what's our liability in that conversation? So thanks for introducing that topic to me, and I'll reflect on it, but I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
I guess it's my turn now, if my computer will work. You want to take over the chair for me, please? Thank you. So the first question that I have, there was a lot of, I guess, noise coming from the provincial government about vacating hospital beds and pushing people out into long-term care or group homes. And what I'm trying to understand, if the patient had early onset Alzheimer's or early onset dementia, and the long-term care facility that they were trying to be pushed to didn't have services for it, how do we handle that? Because not all long-term care facilities are the same, and certainly group homes are not all the same. Not sure who can answer that question. I see Holly pointing at me.
Through the chair. So most long-term care homes are able to accept residents who have some type of cognitive impairment. Some homes have wander guards that we don't require secure resident home areas for residents to be able to live. But most homes have secure resident home areas to keep those residents safe. Where we might struggle with having somebody come to us from hospital with advanced cognitive impairment is in regards to when there are significant advanced responsive behaviors that might require a different level of service or expertise. But generally speaking, we have monthly meetings with Home and Community Care Support where we discuss these ALC barriers to discharge, and I also sit on that particular table. And in Hamilton, I would say that we're moving the needle forward in being able to support and accept residents in our long-term care homes, specifically with cognitive impairment.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. So can I ask then, is that in relationship to Macassa and Wentworth only, or do all long-term care facilities licensed by the province have that ability to accept and provide care to people who have dementia or Alzheimer's?
So through the chair, at our Hamilton Home and Community Care, we have 27 long-term care homes here in Hamilton, and the majority of our homes here are able to support residents with cognitive impairment. Across the 624 in Ontario, again, I think the majority, but I don't have actual numbers of those that are not able to accept.
Thank you for that. With reference to an earlier question, are we providing in long-term care setting translators when translators are needed? My mother-in-law was at St. Peter's Residence in Shadoak, and I watched many patients struggle with English and the care being provided, they didn't know what they were saying.
Through the chair, so I can speak more specifically to Macassa and Wentworth Lodge. We have a language list between our two homes of all of our staff, and I believe the language list is around 50 different languages that we're able to support. The problem will lie if that particular resident needs some support and that staff member isn't working that day. But we have worked with our families, and most of our residents do have families where we're able to create sort of a list of common asks, if you will. Need help to go to the washroom, have pain, and knowing our residents what the issues might be so that we have a care plan with targeted information to be able to support the resident. It's not foolproof, but typically we're able to navigate that together with our families or with our staff that speak the language.
Thank you for that. Can I ask, just changing a bit of direction here, and I think it would be to Mary Burnett, in terms of sensitivity training for private agencies that need to understand patients with dementia, patients with Alzheimer's, how to deal with them, what are the I guess the physical cues, how are we training the broader community? I think of police services, I think of paramedics. There's a long list of people who, and not just in the private sector, but who need to have a better understanding of residents who are in our community with dementia.
I agree wholeheartedly, and probably education is our biggest tool in our toolkit. We do train police here in the city. We train, the Alzheimer's Society trains paramedics, and we also have staff who go into long-term care and train the staff there, or train people who, providers of PSW services and things like that. The issue is, though, there often isn't a lot of money for backfill. So a lot of these organizations don't have the funds to release their staff to have the training. And I think another thing that the Alzheimer's Society is always advocating for is stronger and better training programs at both the college and university level. For even physicians need training. They don't get enough training. Nurses, PSWs, even in the healthcare sector, I would argue there's still a big need for training on dementia.
Yeah, I recall an incident, this is a couple years back now, but I happened to step into line at a grocery store, and I won't mention which one, and an elderly lady was opening her purse to pay for her food and was struggling with coupons and coins and things like that. The lady who was cashing out was kind of glaring, and the fellow behind started to yell, and then I stepped in. And it struck me not only that the person behind didn't have an understanding of what was going on, but that the person serving that individual didn't have an understanding, and there was just anger. And they don't need that. They need patience and assistance. And so that one really struck me. The last one is with regards to seniors housing. Angie spoke about seniors housing. Boy, do we have a lot of nervous seniors in our city right now. When you're wanting to downsize, and in the old days of downsizing and selling your house that was $300,000, you could downsize and find something for $180,000, $200,000, there were savings. Now we have one-floor bungalows that are as expensive as a brand new home. And I've been speaking to seniors in my own community, in my own neighborhood, and they're all looking for a place. Where can we go when we sell our house? There's no seniors rent coming on that is geared to income. It's so challenging. So how do we address that issue? It's bad enough that we had challenges with affordable housing, but now we have seniors that really are struggling. What do I do? I can sell my house, but I have no place to go.
Well, the other area that I'm involved with as well, sorry, through the chair. The other area that I'm involved with is the cooperative housing. And I think that we don't really understand how that works. Mm-hmm. And I really would like to see the city and the cooperative housing sector work closer together, because their model is very different. The principles are basically the same as for age-friendly. We have those principles, you know, independent, security of tenure. You know, it's there, and we don't utilize it.
Yep.
So I think that looking or moving forward, it's an area that we need to be more involved with. Some of the housing that is being developed needs to be cooperative, because the people will then work as a community, because we look after our own. You know, as people age, there's things in place for them. And one of the things that I've realized over the years, I mean, cooperative housing's been around now for about 40 years in Ontario. And when they built the houses in the 80s, a lot of them were for families. Mm-hmm. They didn't think of people aging. So now you have this issue where people need to downsize, they're empty nesters, all those kinds of things, and there's nowhere for them to go. They're either overhoused underhoused or whatever. So I'm thinking that moving forward, any new developments that are out there, there is actually one happening right now, Courttown Housing, Courttown Cooperative. That was my first co-op that I ever lived in when I came to Hamilton. And they've taken the initiative to now build, the new build that they're going to be doing is going to be for 17 units. And I think 13 of them, I don't know, don't sort of quote me on everything here, but I think 13 of the units will be one bedrooms, and then on the top level will be for families. And the way that they're designing this is that as a family grows, the walls are movable walls. I just cannot wait to see when this is finished built. But what they're doing is that the members who were living in the original building, they can actually transition to the one bedrooms. So they're looking after their community. So those are the things that we have to start thinking about, you know. As we age, we're not going away. Okay?
I'm just going to add to that, just one more thing. Just so there is the co-op housing, but there's also, and it's in the age-friendly plan, is other housing models like co-housing. So maybe it's around educating older adults on various options. It's not the old way. We have this house, we sell it, and we move into something smaller. There are other options out there. And then also with the, was passed last year, secondary dwelling units. So whether it's a granny flat on their property or they build something in the home, there's other options where they may be able to just stay in their house and be able to maintain that as they age.
Yeah, sadly, far too many people are using market value for those secondary dwelling units, and people are now paying $2,400 a month for a basement apartment, which is in my ward, which is just mind-boggling to me. Anyways, I'll take the chair back. Any further questions? Councillor Wang, you're on for a second time. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You prompted a couple of other ideas, and I wanted to run them by you. Do you do any type of advocacy to other levels of government? I'm thinking about, we have a talent shortage specifically with PSWs, especially if we're looking at people trying to age in place, that support system of a PSW. But this is where we can feasibly look at immigration levels and potentially bring in foreign trained PSWs to help support. So is that something that's on your radar at all through you, Chair?
Thank you.
The Hamilton Council on Aging sees one of its main goals is to advocate for older adults in the city. So Margaret Denton is back on our board, Councillor Jackson, yes, and we have a whole education and advocacy committee that does send letters off on a regular basis to different levels of government. They do editorial pieces in the Hamilton Spectator, and I agree. We have got to get more PSWs. We need more in-home care. The Alzheimer's Society does advocacy for that. I don't know, is it a little bit more awkward for a municipality? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, and the other thing with the Council on Aging is they're a part of the Ontario Councils on Aging, so they do come together and do some advocacy work as well. So that's something certainly that we could bring back to the Council on Aging. I think it's a tricky one with staff. For this, I can't, the Seniors Advisory Committee can't, they have to go through City Council, right? So through the Hamilton Council on Aging, the advocacy piece, working with them is key to this work.
Councillor Holly Diardi, please.
Through the chair, we belong to Advantage Ontario for our long-term care homes, and Advantage Ontario advocates for both long-term care and community services. And through that advocacy, Lisa Levin continually speaks about PSWs as well as RNs and RPNs for internationally trained supports coming.
Wonderful. I think that there's a real opportunity too, because just as Lisa said, it's perhaps not in sort of her purview, but we do have other groups within the city of Hamilton that may be able to help and support and at least coordinate. I know that Hamilton Health Sciences is actively looking at an advocacy campaign on foreign credentialing for internationally trained nurses. So perhaps we can copy and paste that framework and see if we can bring more foreign trained PSWs, because we just cannot train them fast enough homegrown. So thank you very much, Chair. Those are all my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have no more speakers. Lisa, Penelope, Angie, Mary, what a wealth of information you have provided, and we do want to thank you for your continued support and help in making Hamilton an age-friendly city. Thank you very much. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation, moved by Councillor Tom Jackson, seconded by Councillor Cameron Kretsch. We'll have that vote. I did not even have to look, Councillor. I knew it was your hand. That vote carried 7-0. I also need a mover and a seconder to receive the information report, which is attached in your files, moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Nan. Any questions on the report itself? Seeing none, we'll call that vote also, please. Thank you. That vote carried 7-0. We're now moving on to our consent items. Number 9.1, Building Safer Communities. It's a multi-year plan. It is an information report. Are there any questions on that document? Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you, and through you, thank you to staff for the update. Just a few questions on the report. Just bear with me as I scroll through to find them. The $3.6 million over 3 years is to focus on all 3 priority areas that have been identified in the report. And inside the report, there is discussion around crime prevention, and the framework of the funding is to focus on guns and gangs. I was wondering if I could, through you, get some clarity about how guns and gangs is defined for this work, and also which crime specifically we're trying to prevent in terms of youth engagement, and whether or not guns and gangs includes a reference to gangs, i.e. Those that might be also white supremacist organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe that would go to Jessica Chase.
Thanks so much. Through the chair, Jessica Chase, Director of Children's and Community Services. So this work is funded by Public Safety Canada, and when they talk about guns and gangs, it's quite broad in terms of the definition of that. They haven't specifically defined what is included in guns and gangs. I think in terms of what we're hearing from the community is what you see in the report is some of those priority areas. So we've heard that there needs to be a focus on prevention activities and not only launching but expanding what already exists. We know that there is a lot of really great work happening with our community partners already. But for instance, we've heard that there can sometimes be gaps in terms of how long and the hours of service that are provided by some of those prevention programs. So that's one of the areas that we're going to be focusing on. We're also going to be working closely with community partners around what supports need to be provided for those that are exiting gangs. And then also the opportunity for us to look at how we can improve collaboration and systems coordination. So as I said, lots of great work already happening in the community with our community partners that I think we can build on, and how can we work together more closely as a collaborative.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The reason I'm asking is over the years, we've been talking through this committee about the increased activity of young people being solicited and or engaged in hate-based activity in the city, and looking at graffiti, a lot of racist graffiti, I'll name it, right? A lot of racist graffiti appearing in Ward 3. A lot of homophobic, transphobic graffiti appearing in Ward 3. That's just the graffiti. That's not the engagement that we're seeing or having, anecdotally shared by families and households about their experiences in our public parks. And so as we're trying to foster a community of belonging and as a council really focus on mitigating hate, I'm wondering what might we see in the horizon through this work that is focused on addressing that specific trend in the city.
Jessica?
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. And as you were talking, it made me think about the work and how it's aligned closely with our community safety and well-being plans. So we see the Building Safer Communities Fund really closely linked with that work. And in fact, it's situated in the same area within our division. And as you know, one of the priority areas within community safety and well-being is looking at hate mitigation, hate incidents. And so the work that we've been doing, working closely with our colleagues, Morgan Stahl and Intergovernmental relations, as well as with a number of community partners to look at how we can address hate incidents across our community, looking at some campaigns as well as education. So I think there's certainly lots of opportunity for us to think some more about, as we move this work forward, how can we align those two initiatives.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. And the other question was, in that wider definition of guns and gangs, is there any honing in particularly on drug trades and the involvement of young people in that here in Hamilton?
Jessica?
So it's a fairly broad, through the chair, it's a broad definition of guns and gangs. However, what has honed in is priority populations. So we are specifically looking, and we've done some work just this last year on some rapid granting, where we were focused on engaging specifically with Indigenous youth, with newcomer youth, Black youth, and young women. And so that will, I think, continue to be a priority as we move forward, is looking at how we specifically engage with our priority populations.
Excellent. Really pleased to see so much emphasis on the prevention and the upstream kind of work that needs to be funded and supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on this report? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the information report. Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. We'll call that vote, please. Thank you. And that vote carries 6-0. We're now moving on to the second report, which is item 9.2, which is the Poverty Reduction Investment Plan, CES 16043F. Are there any questions for Michelle Baird? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some questions, but I would ask, given the importance of the subject and the investments, if an overview can first be provided.
Michelle?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. So the report before you is the annual report
You
on the
move
poverty.
There you go.
I got it. Through the chair. So the report before you is the annual update on the Poverty Reduction Fund. The Poverty Reduction Fund was established in 2017, and there was $50 million invested over a 10-year period at that point in time. The report basically outlines the spending to date against the commitments at that time. So $10 million of the $50 million was specifically for Indigenous poverty reduction. Then we had $20 million that was to go toward new build, and another $20 million toward repairs or renovations within our social housing units. And so now that we're partway through that spending, each year we come forward with respect to an update on what specific projects that funding has went toward over the past 12 months.
Councillor?
So just thank you very much for that. Just so I understand, halfway through the spending, and I think as a community, and certainly speaking for myself, a growing appreciation of the severity of the matter. And we now have established the Housing Sustainability Investment Roadmap. We now have a clear understanding that with the urgency that is facing us, we need to be aware of the importance of bringing existing units that may be offline because they require maintenance, that there's a greater return on investment, if you will. So with that plan in mind, how are those strategies and those priorities informing this going forward?
Thank you. GM Burden?
Angie Burden, General Manager of Healthy and Safe Communities, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. When the poverty reduction plan was established, there was in fact a plan that allocated the dollars. And so what you have before you is a report that is explaining how those commitments are now being acted on. But we don't see a venue to reevaluate in terms of how those allocations are being distributed for future years, because they are in fact previous commitments by council. Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you. So if I understand that, we're locked in to these commitments for the tenure of this monies and the strategy. Is that basically it?
Jan Burden?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yes, that's correct. And I would say that when we think about the allocation for Indigenous poverty reduction, those are still in alignment with the housing roadmap and the homelessness and housing action plan. And it would be challenging to rescind on any of those commitments. The new affordable rental housing plan expired in 2021, and it's the Indigenous poverty reduction and the ongoing social housing repair and renovation that continues until 2027. And both are in line with both the roadmap and the housing and homelessness action plan.
Councillor?
Thank you. Yes, I don't want anyone to maybe suggest that we would be in the business of rescinding anything, but looking forward, could you help me understand what happens at the conclusion of this funding?
That's a good question.
Through the chair.
Michelle Baird?
So through the chair, the funding really is time limited. At the end of 2027, there is no longer a source of funding for these particular initiatives. This is a piece that we've been giving consideration to ourselves, knowing that many providers that are funded through this, including City Housing Hamilton, for example, will find themselves in a place where the funding is no longer, it's not a sustainable funding source, I would say.
Councillor?
So if I just heard you correctly, staff are deliberating a future in the absence of this. Is it fair to, I guess my question is, in deliberating a future in the absence of the earmarked, I think, is it 50 million? Is there a way in which you're thinking of infusing poverty reduction into other programs as opposed to just housing, if that 50 million may not be there? Through the chair. And if these questions are too premature, I can take that as an answer, but I'm just looking ahead. Thank you.
Michelle?
Through the chair, I'm going to ask Manager Brian Krebs to speak to a bit of this. The questions are certainly not premature. They are ones that we're considering ourselves. There is some complexity around some of the providers, the different pieces that this has been used to fund, but I'll let Brian provide some pieces to that.
Brian, please.
Through the chair, one of the things that I would point out is that the poverty reduction plan was put in place before some of the funding programs that have been created by the provincial and federal government. So we now have the COCHI and OFI program, which are helping to take up some of the repair needs within the social housing sector. And to Director Baird's point, what we are going to need to do is to understand what needs remain unmet beyond what COCHI and OFI can provide, because COCHI is largely repair, OFI is largely new build. So we'll need to understand what gaps will remain. And that's an evolving thing as COCHI and OFI's guidelines continue to change.
Councillor?
I think I will take the remainder of my questions offline. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to staff.
Keep us posted, because it was an excellent line of questions that we do have to deal with in the near future. Okay, no. I got Councillor Alex Wilson on this one.
Thank you. Just trying to close a little bit of what my colleague started there for me. So what I heard was on the housing side, the funding of the original 50 million has all been allocated. And so what's essentially left of this is there's the $1 million yearly going to the Indigenous poverty reduction, and there's the $2 million annually still coming in to housing, of which we have been, this year we did 1 million of that to city housing and 1 million to housing services. So every year there's $3 million coming in that are earmarked for specific programs, but the rest of that $50 million has all been allocated.
Michelle?
Through the chair, so the remainder, yes, has been allocated. What I would say, though, is that on a yearly basis, we're determining, for example, within the social housing provider group, the allocation is to them, and then within that year, figure out where the capital repairs need to go. But yes, it's committed funding.
Thanks so much. That was just trying to finish off that what's been allocated, what's coming in, and it's committed, but not maybe to a specific program so much as a specific outcome or type of intervention. So thank you.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Nan?
Thank you, through you, Chair. And just to pick up on that last piece, so committed annually, and just one clarity about the number of units. So if I heard Director Baird correctly, that number fluctuates based on the 1 million out to our social housing providers for repairs, but the report mentioned 399 units at a particular rate. I may have missed it in the report. That's not an annual target of 399 units. That is just for that reporting period, right? Okay, good, thanks.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. That's for the past 12-month period. There are different types of repairs that happen, and the extent would determine the cost and how the allocation happens.
Thank you. I like how that tag team worked down the line, just one after another. Thank you very much. Any further questions? I am not seeing any, so I need a mover and a seconder to receive item number 9.2, moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Thank you. We'll call that question, please. Thank you. And directly after this vote, councillors, we're going to be moving to item number 12.1, which was moved up just prior to that vote carries 7-0 to just prior to discussion items. So Councillor Kretsch, if you're ready, and I think you want to move a motion to waive the rules.
I do want to first move a motion to waive the rules. This just got on here a little bit later than I'd hoped, so it's just a timing issue, and seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson to do that before we get to the motion itself.
So this is a very time-sensitive issue, and we're waiving the rules on it. Thank you. That motion carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor. You can proceed to introduce your motion.
Thanks very much. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. It's about affordable housing here in Ward 2, 272 Caroline Street South. And I won't read it all the way as statements, but I want to just take a moment to thank both the Ward 2 team and residents for stewarding this for many months. Real simple. People's buildings came up for sale, and they said, wow, maybe this is an opportunity to turn our apartment building into a co-op that we could own ourselves. How are we going to do it? And I'll be honest, when they first came forward, I was like, I don't know. And to the point of the delegate from moments ago, or the person presenting, was saying the city's got to be more involved in co-op housing. Well, here it is. It's happening. And we talked back and forth about the different ways the city could be involved in funding this. And it's something we haven't done. And so what we did was took a bunch of existing processes, all little processes and policies that already exist, and kind of cobbled them together, knowing that the Housing Sustainability Investment Roadmap's already looking at doing this, but hasn't come up with an overall policy to do it. So what we did was cobbled a bunch of smaller policies together, things like rental subsidy programs and policies, other kinds of housing support incentives and policies, and in this case, a bit of area rating funding to help with the actual purchase itself. And so I've run this by all the finance staff, I've run this by housing staff. There's a little legal wrinkle somewhere in here that has to be resolved before council. Not going to stop this from occurring, but just in terms of defining the terms a little bit, that has to happen still. And so apologies for it not being in front of us at the moment. But it's really more of a procedural thing than it is anything else. If we do have it though now, we could do it. It seems we do, so I'll get to that in a second. And just want to say that this is happening and coming forward now, separate from the stuff about rental subsidies, because they want to be able to use this to continue the process going forward. So the folks who've done this have gotten funding from the Hamilton Community Foundation and their partners, from I think it was the Golden Horseshoe Cooperative Association, a whole host of different people. They've cobbled funding together themselves, right, to put this money together to ensure that they can purchase this building and keep this housing affordable. It's 21 units. It's not a huge amount, and there aren't going to be opportunities to do this every single day. It's a rare opportunity up to this point, and hopefully as more and more buildings go up for sale, we could think about how the city can continue to support these things. It is not a sustainable model right now to use area rating funding to do this. I want to be clear about that. It's not sustainable for us to do that. But in a situation like this, we're talking about the impact of $84,000 for 21 deeply affordable housing units from that contribution. The impact is incredible for the amount of money we're spending. So I think it's a worthwhile investment of that money, and I think it's important to move this forward. There'll be one more step coming forward, I believe, in August before it's all finalized by the city. And thanks again to staff in housing who really looked at the policies, thought about it, figured out how we could make it work, and got it here today. So appreciate that, and appreciate the tenants who, really fought to make this happen. They did. They really worked overtime to make this happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wang?
I think this is awesome. So thank you to Councillor Crutch for his leadership on that. Quick question then, does this mean that we are some sort of shareholder in 272 Caroline Street South Cooperative, Inc.?
Not to my knowledge.
No?
Nope, I'm seeing nobody's shaking their head yes.
Okay. So beyond the $84,000 for the down payment, what does, I guess I just want to understand what that really means for the city. It's just literally is it like a loan, or what's the mechanism here?
Councillor Crutch, I believe it's a grant, but Councillor Crutch.
I'll speak to it briefly. That's the only legal wrinkle left, is just in terms of what that looks like, in terms of what mechanism it is we're going to give it to them in. It's meant to be a grant, essentially, or it's meant to be a direct give. But obviously the idea is that we want to keep the housing affordable. So that's the one little bit that we haven't written into here yet, is just that we're giving this money with the idea of being affordable. And so sorry that hasn't come before us yet, but that was a legal wrinkle sort of introduced a little bit later. But apparently, according to Elsie Kolar, there will be actually the ability to put the amendment on the table because legal got back to us in time. So never mind everything I just said.
If it's the committee's wish, I can show the amended motion at
that would be excellent. You're done? She is not saying that in a pejorative way, but just a factful way. You cannot renege on a doneness. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. So this looks like it's a loan program with a 20-year repayable. Perhaps as ancillary to this, have we considered purchasing a share into the cooperative at all at any point in time?
Legal's not with us, so why don't we have you speak with legal prior to council?
This looks awesome, so I'm in favor of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Pardon me, pardon the interruption, Chair. I believe that I have the wrong version up on the screen. Is that right? Am I reading your lips correctly? No? Oh, sorry. I overthought that. Sorry about that, Chair.
That's why I don't read lips. I never get it right. Scrolling down. I'm hearing that song, The Stroll, but I'm showing my age.
Through you, Chair. So I had some comments, but I'm actually going to go with some questions first because I have questions about that. So we've gone from grant to loan. No? Forgive up. Thank you. That's the word out. There we go. So, yep. We do this all the time. We do this all of the time, where the city of Hamilton gives money, whether it's in ECDEV to a business to set up, whether it's in, we'll waive a fee, we'll say, no, you don't have to go get this permit, you don't have to do this. We have development charge waivers. This is how we do things a lot of the time, is via this subsidy. I think it is so incredible that we are taking this step to think about, in a real crisis, in a moment where people are being forced out of their homes, out of their control by decisions made by politicians, by decisions made by landlords, we need to be thinking about how can we keep people safe? Not just thinking about units, but thinking about people. And I am so excited to have this spirit of what we could do if we got serious about protecting, because when we get serious about moving affordable housing out of the market, we've talked a lot of the time about one of the issues we're having is not necessarily just a supply crisis. The issue is that it is a privatized market, and therefore there's a shortage of affordable housing. There's a shortage of attainable housing. There's also a shortage of just period housing, but it's mostly those first two. And so I really do not only get excited about this, but I get excited about what's to come. Because the more units that we can take out of the market, the more of a cooling effect they have, the more of a protective effect they have. 21 units today, understanding this isn't still a repeatable or a sustainable mechanism, but we're finding creative ways to do that work. And every single unit that we can move out of the private market into the non-market system is a unit that's going to have a protective effect on every renter in this city. And so I just think that's so exciting, and it speaks to the solidarity that we need to have and the care for our neighbors we need to have in managing this crisis together. So thank you, not just to the mover, but to the tenants for really pushing this, because this is I know Councillor Crutch will say this himself, this is a tenant-led movement, this is a renter-led movement, and so exciting that for once our city's been able to kind of partner with those folks doing that push, and I hope we can keep doing that partnership as we keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you. Because I have declared a non-disqualifying interest, I will keep my questions maybe more analytical. My understanding is that co-op movement represents a meager 3% of Canada's third sector housing market. And because maybe those who are watching want to better understand some of the enthusiasm of my colleagues, if I could ask through the chair to staff, could just define for us what is co-op housing and what makes it distinguishable in that third sector, please?
That sounds like a question for Brian.
So through the chair, co-op nonprofit housing is different than nonprofit housing in that the members are the tenants. So instead of having a board made up of interested parties who have skills to bring to the administration of the project, it is tenants who, or in the case of co-ops, they're called members. In many regards, it functions very similarly in terms of being focused on the provision of affordable, deeply affordable and low end of market rent. Some of the legal requirements they have are different because they're incorporated under different legislation. They have some slightly different rules to follow. And one other point I would make is that this is a co-op, a nonprofit housing co-op, as opposed to an equity co-op. Whereas an equity co-op, people purchase a share. In this case, members are simply purchasing a membership in the co-op, and that's tied to a unit.
You did that very well. Who's up next? Councillor Maureen Wilson still.
Yep. So just so I understand that last point through the chair, so co-op housing units cannot be sold or even passed on to a friend.
Brian?
Through the chair.
Through the chair, that is correct. Membership has to be applied for through the board. There's an interview process, and they have to follow their own bylaws in terms of what the wait list process is.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'm Chair. I'm just reading a quote from the Federal Minister of Housing in 1985 when they spoke very with great admiration for co-op housing programs to serve moderate and middle income households as well as households in core need. The orientation of the new program recognizes the dual objectives of cooperatives, a social housing objective and an objective of providing security of tenure as an alternative to home ownership. And then the essay goes on to say, despite all this glory, it has actually been tenants, sometimes in partnership with municipal governments, who have actually moved the bar, not the ministers who have actually spoken of the promise of cooperatives. So just put that out there. Just another clarification then. So I think you just said they can't be sold or passed on to a friend. And so when a resident moves, they don't take that equity with them. Is that correct, through the chair?
Brian?
Through the chair, that is correct. There is no equity.
Right, okay. Just another point, if I could make to Mr. Krebs, and I'll put it in the form of a question. My understanding is that when co-ops have been evaluated across Canada, they have actually been deemed to outperform most other housing models because there seems to be an incentive on the part of the residents to participate in the running of the housing, whether it be its upkeep, whether it be its grounds, whether it be the condition of its units. Would you care to comment on your knowledge of any assessment of co-ops, please and thank you.
So through the chair, I'm not aware of evaluations overall, but certainly the selling point for cooperative nonprofit housing is the community building approach. Another one is that often those communities might be grounded in ethnic communities. They might be grounded in particular affinity groups of one sort or another. Hamilton has Women's Co-op, which is dedicated to women over the age of 40. They can serve very specific purposes in a way that other forms of housing cannot or don't.
Councillor?
Thank you. I really appreciate the expert insight offered by staff, and therefore I will keep my questions to the promise of co-ops. Thank you.
Thank you. See, Kolar, could you put up that motion again? Councillor Kretsch had indicated in his commentary that it was a forgivable loan, but it was not included in any of the language. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Thank you very much. I was just reading all of the language and didn't see it. Much appreciated. Any further questions? Seeing none, we're voting on the motion, please. Thank you.
Through the chair. So we
That's
just
the
voted
amendment?
on the amendment, and now we will have a vote on the motion as amended.
Thank you. Always keeping me honest. That one carried 7-0, and now we'll have on the motion as amended. Same mover and seconder. And it closed. Oh, there it is. Thank you. And that vote carried 7-0. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to our discussion items. 10.1 is a citizen committee report. Rebecca Banky, chair of the advisory, is here. If there are any questions, may I have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor? Who wishes to move it? Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Kretsch.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from the chair a little bit about what she thinks the impact of these changes will be for the committee. As a former chair of the committee and former member of the committee, I'm excited we're here in terms of this being a project that was there for a while, but would love to just hear from you, Rebecca, if you don't mind, about what you're excited about in this.
Thank you.
If anything. It may just be procedural or technical, and you may not be excited, but I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in if there was something you wanted us to see.
Thank you, Chair Banky. Good to see you again. Please proceed.
Thank you, and Councillor, through the chair. What am I excited about in the update to our terms of reference? There's a couple of things, some corrective language, a little bit more respectfully used. There's an unusual inconsistency where the working group we set up to change the name of the committee has not completed their work yet, so our committee is still operating with a name we don't necessarily intend to be the name for the long term. So there's a few places in the terms of reference where we're using inconsistent language, but we're using the most appropriate language in the context where it's appropriate. We also clarified a couple of things about citizens involved in the committee, established what we think the count of the committee would be to be effective as a group. And in general, just had a look at a document that was seeing its age. The last version of the terms of reference for the advisory committee that we were able to surface was from 2015. So some of the stuff is pretty out of date and not necessarily in line with the practices as we've been doing them so far. So it's important that the terms of reference accurately reflect the work, and I think they now do. It's not always the sexiest citizen committee report I get to be here talking about, but it's functional and it's necessary. That's where my excitements are.
Thank you, Chair Banky. Councillor?
Thanks for that. I really appreciate it. And thanks for flagging, too, that we're going to see an updated terms of reference once the committee changes its name. So this is just round number 1, which is going to make some changes to make things more consistent with the committee's work. And then round 2 will be once the name of the change, once the committee changes its name, then there'll be all the further revisions to be made. Thank you for this, and thanks for the work. I know it's tedious and difficult, and grateful for it.
Governance work is always tedious, but it's well worthwhile. Thank you, Chair, for all of your work. Any further questions for the Chair? Well, seeing none, thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded, I believe. See ya. And we'll have that vote now. And that vote carried 7-0. Thank you very much. We're moving on to item 10.2, which is group purchasing services for food and related supplies, HSC 18026A. Holly O'Doherty, Senior Administrator of Long-Term Care, is here to answer any of your questions. I'll have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor. Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Wang. Any questions? Councillor Wang, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just something I'd like to just understand. We've had this same relationship with this same organization for 20 plus years, and I know if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of idea, but have we ever done maybe an environmental scan to just see if there were other vendors that might be able to provide the same level of service at the same price point? Not that I am expecting this to go out to tender or any type of procurement. I just want to know if we've ever done any type of background environmental scan just to see if there's any other vendors that could help us fulfill this. Through you, Chair.
That's a fair question. Holly?
Through the chair, that is what's before you today. We're not coming back with a 5-year report. We're asking to continue for another 2 years. There was a preliminary scan done, and there might be another opportunity for us to look at a different group purchasing organization that has multiple vendors with them. With the work of the pandemic that continues in long-term care, it's been difficult to have focused time to work on such a large project. And through procurement, this was the avenue to take to bring forward to council to ask for 2 years for staff to do this deep dive into other opportunities that might we would be able to bring back as recommendations to move forward.
Okay.
Councillor.
That's all I was looking for. I probably should have read this a touch more deeply, so thank you.
No problem. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you. I think just a quick comment and a quick question from me. On the question side, is this contract impacting, because I know historically community service organizations via Meals on Wheels have used some of our lodges, kitchens and food services there. Is this contract related to those Meals on Wheels programs if we are still their vendor and things like that? Yeah.
Thank you. Holly?
Through the chair, it does not affect Meals on Wheels. They have a different sourcing, but we just provide meals to them. And just to mention that if we have the opportunity to complete this review sooner than the 2 years, we would certainly bring that back before then.
Councillor?
Thank you. I found a second question, but I think it helps get there. When we do that review and when that review is happening, the primary consideration is what is our level of service, and then finding the most affordable option that meets that service standard. Is that generally speaking what the review will look like?
Through the chair, that's exactly it. We want to make sure that, one, we're meeting all of the procurement policies, and at the same time, we're finding the most affordable, as well as some of them have options for the staff to be either having education, different programs available. So it's a complete scan of what these different group purchasing options have available. There's the RFP process that might be different, and through procurement, group purchasing typically do not apply to RFP. So that's why it's a little bit more of a deep dive and detailed synopsis that we're going to have to do, because group purchasing tends to be quite a bit different than the typical RFP.
Councillor?
Thank you. Just a quick comment as we set our priorities, and one of them is about sustainable decision-making both for our ecology and our economy. One of the things that some cities across North America have begun doing is getting a sense of the recovery rate or the local circulation rate of various investments. We don't have those numbers here, and so it's really hard to do it, but Austin, Texas, for example, knows that money spent on a downtown street is likely to recirculate in the economy 8 times before it leaves. Whereas we know if you go and take that same dollar to McDonald's or Starbucks, it's gone. It's out of the local economy right away. And so we don't have those types of numbers, so there's no way that this service and this kind of review can incorporate that. But when we think about local providers, when we think about the comparative benefit, if we had those types of numbers, if we had that type of analysis, we might be able to say, do you know what? It does cost more to do this, but this local provider actually provides a broader benefit because they pay a livable wage to local Hamiltonians, because they provide a different benefit. I just wanted to point out with this incredible, this incredible push that we're doing, it's so important. We don't necessarily have the tools we should have to make the best decisions. That's not staff on this report's decision. That's us as a council to get those tools. So just as we think about what our priorities mean, I'd like to give this as an example for us to consider.
Thank you. You may want to speak with procurement, because we have to follow procurement rules with regards to a few of these international trade treaties that really challenge us when we want to just use local vendors. So, Holly?
Through the chair, we have reports that we can share. I don't have them before me today to identify how much local purchasing that we've been doing. And we do have Ann Kaler on the line with us, I believe, who participated in some long-term care homes who started with the local grow and purchasing. And I think that she would be able to share a little bit more information about what we do around that local purchasing for our homes.
Ann Kaler, are you there?
Yes, I am here, sir. Through the chair, we do not have any updated percentages of locally purchased items as a percentage of our overall purchases between the two lodges. The most recent information I have is for 2020. Combined for both lodges, it's about 33.5%. Ontario grown items is about 11%. And of the overall purchases, 2.37% is considered certified sustainable. We have asked the group purchasing organization to provide 2022 numbers, and they weren't able to get it to me in time for this meeting. The project that Holly is referring to was a partnership with the Golden Horseshoe Alliance. We did the initial work with them along with, I believe, Halton and another region, Durham. They did a scan of our purchases, what were local, encouraged us to continue to increase our numbers overall purchases. We at one point, the two city homes were able to get it to almost as close as 40% at the time. They have since moved on to working with other organizations to put a push on for purchasing local. So our goal continues to be to purchase local. Both the Macassa Lodge Director and myself do put a fair bit of focus on that to continue and bring in as much as we can within what is available with group purchasing. I just want to add that we have had some challenges with that over the pandemic, and part of it is supply chain issues.
Councillor?
Nothing further, just a lot of gratitude for that, both answer and that, again, that explanation or that kind of further answer from staff saying like, this is where we are trying to lead, or this is where we are trying to go with the tools we have. Again, I want to make a comment just to the horseshoe here is I think we can give our staff better tools, but really thank you so much for that leadership and kind of taking it further.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maureen Wilson on this item.
Thank you. I think perhaps on a similar vein, earlier today we were talking about poverty reduction and poverty reduction strategy. And then we have a report here which illustrates that the City of Hamilton is a huge consumer of goods. And I've always been interested, Chair, in using that fact to provide a long-term poverty reduction strategy. So in our procurement, whether we're able to provide living wage, training opportunities in the creation of local businesses that are social enterprises that provide training on the job to source and feed, say, the recreational services. Not only are we able to provide a service, it is poverty reduction. We are using public monies to achieve what is our said priority objective here. And I've never really understood, and this is not casting any shade on staff, I've never really been able to understand why we cannot use our significant spending power to achieve multiple goals. My vague recollection is there is a public entity that got together. For example, the mats that are in public buildings, they get very soiled during the winter with salt and everything. There is a social enterprise that takes those mats at all public entities, hospitals, school board properties, and municipal centers, and they run a business that is a social enterprise. And it's a way in which to generate money, ownership, equity, living wage, and keep it in this economy. It's something I can't figure out why we can't get there. And when I saw this and another sole source, and I understand, I think as a council, we have to have a deliberation about achieving multiple objectives with our need to purchase things. So I'll just leave it there. That was more of a comment than a question. It's just something that's been intriguing me for a long, long time. And I know more public entities in the States do this. I think we have to move in that direction. That's my opinion. Thank you.
I know some of the hospitals and even some of the long-term care facilities started to do that with laundry services and things like
laundry,
that.
yes, yes.
So there are examples locally and more has to be done. So thank you for bringing that up. Any further questions on the item then? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please. Votes up. That vote carried unanimously, 7-0. Now we're moving on to item 10.3, which is the menstrual products pilot update. Chris Herstick, Director, Recreation Division, is here to answer your questions on the report. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor? Moved by Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Nan. And who's doing it? Janine? Okay, go ahead. Just following my roadmap here.
Yes.
You don't look like Chris.
No, a little changed. So hi, I'm Janine Gaunt, Senior Manager, Recreation Operations. So staff were asked to report back to committee after our presentation on how the pilot project had gone, on financial implications of providing various products rather than just the regular size products we were currently providing. So before you have the report, where we have been in contact with Hamilton Food Share, who already actually has purchased the varied product. They feel they can do it within their allotment of the 91,000 that they've been given. And before you have an option for recreation to swap out some product that we have regular size with what they've already purchased of a varied size. And there would be no cost to that moving forward for 2023.
That's always a good thing. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please. And that vote carried 7-0. We're now moving on to item 10.4, which is the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative and Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative Agreement 2022 to 2025. They don't seem to be able to get these titles any longer. It's just so boring. Michelle Baird, Director of Housing Services, is here to answer your questions. Let's have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Wang. Any questions for Director Baird? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you. Just one, and it may be in the report and I may have missed it, but I'm wondering contextually, if I could ask Director Baird, it always looks like when we get these reports, again, there's not at all a shade casting here, that it looks like a lot of money. But in the context of need and in the context of historic investment, my understanding is this is a significant diminishment of money. So are you able to shed any light on a broader context of funding? Thank you, through the chair.
Thank you, Director Baird.
So through the chair. Yes, so you're correct on paper. It certainly looks like a significant amount of money. I guess I can speak to this from a few different places. For this year, it's $10 million and an additional $12 million in the second year. It's a 2-year funding. To place that contextually, right now it takes anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000 to build an affordable unit. When we look at the money before us, there's a whole suite of work really that we can focus these dollars on, but certainly it doesn't go as far as it may look. So historically, last year we did have the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative portion of this funding hasn't changed year over year, so we're seeing the same as last year. We are seeing a slight increase on the COCHI, or the Canada-Ontario Housing Initiative side of the funding, and that's specifically tied to our end of agreement work for the social housing providers. So this particular funding in front of you, the staff is recommending that on the COCHI side of the funding, that we do continue to use that for repairs within our social housing providers, that we use it as we go forward with our end of mortgage, end of agreement work, as well to do some work on building condition assessments within our social housing provider buildings overall, and then some will go towards rent supplements. But again, to your point, Councillor, we're talking about really not large dollars for that whole envelope of work before us. On the OFI side of things, the Ontario Priority Housing Initiative, that $3 million before you will be used to support the building of new affordable units, including accessory dwelling units. But again, when we look at the fiscal year funding, it certainly is not enough to cover the need in our community when we think about what we need for affordable units.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that context. I am a neighbor of mine who's very active, volunteering of his time on matters related to affordable housing, stated that the average annual provincial funding prior to 2019 was $21 million, and how this compares to the 12 million. And I didn't know whether you could, if you wanted to comment on that.
Through the chair, apologies, Councillor, I can't comment on that right now.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Nan?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a quick question regarding the OFI component. The proposed uses, one for development of new affordable housing, rental housing, recognizing the limitations of how far those funds will go. The other is to support the existing Ontario Renovates program, including secondary suites forgivable loan program and the emergency home repair program. Those two programs, are the terms and conditions of those programs set by the municipality or by the province?
Through the chair, it's actually set by the province through our OFI agreement, which is the challenge we ran into last year when trying to use this, because the parameters around the funding, the guidelines, are fairly limiting. They're quite conservative, I would say, and so we are limited in the number of accessory dwelling units we can build through this funding. There will be other opportunities available. When we look specifically at this funding source, the province sets the guidelines for us.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, can I just clarify, in those provincial guidelines for secondary suites forgivable loan program, is there stipulation that those are rented out at an affordable rate?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct, that the individuals that are accessing the funding, so building the unit, are coming from a low-income group, and that they're continually rented out at an affordable rate.
Thank you. Those are my only questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please. The vote is up. That vote carried 7-0. So we do have a closed session item?
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I need a motion to move into closed session pursuant to subsection 9.3, subsection B of the city's procedural bylaw 21-021 as amended, and section 239.2, subsection B of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including city or local board employees. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favor, please. Votes up, councillors. Members of the public are advised that during the closed session portion of today's meeting, the live stream will broadcast a closed session in progress screen. The broadcast will resume when the closed session portion of the meeting is complete. Could I now ask that all members of the committee to please ensure they are in a private room and to please ensure that you are in Includes portal of eScribe. That vote carried unanimously. Oh, I also have to remind members of the committee that as per section 8.7 of the procedural bylaw, the use of electronic devices closed meetings is strictly prohibited. However, staff from the office of the city clerk are exempted from 8.7b when using electronic devices for record keeping. Any staff in the building who is not a party to this matter, if they could please vacate the chambers, that would be wonderful. Can you swing that door shut behind you, Darrell? Thank you, sir. Out of trouble? Jessica does magic now? Is that in the job description? Yes. I watched America Got Talent. They're pretty.
It's going to remain cold, don't worry.
As my granddaughter would say, would you like me to shake that for you, Papa? Let me know when we're live again. We are live. We're back in open session. Item 14.1 to the housing staffing report. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the following. A, that the direction provided to staff in closed session respecting report HSC 23036 access to housing staffing be approved, and B, that report HSC 23036 respecting access to housing staff remain confidential. Who's moving it? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Nan. And we'll have that vote. Councillor Jackson is giving his thumbs up. That vote carried 7-0. Councillors, is there any new business? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. If you vote against, you get to stay. That vote carried 7-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.